The sun cast long shadows over the quiet suburban street as Daniel pulled into his driveway, shutting off his engine with a tired sigh. He had lived in this neighborhood for 3 years, long enough to know the rhythm of things: kids riding their bikes until dusk, retirees tending to their flower beds, and the occasional neighborly wave exchanged between driveways. It was peaceful, predictable, until Karen moved in. She had arrived 6 months ago, and from the very first day, she made sure everyone knew she was in charge, or at least, that's what she wanted to believe. With her clipboard in hand and an exaggerated sense of authority, she paraded around the neighborhood like a self-appointed sheriff, pointing out violations that no one had ever heard of. Trash cans left out a minute too long? Warning: a garden gnome in the wrong spot? Citation: a car parked slightly over the line? Immediate fine, payable directly to her, of course. Most people just brushed her off. They rolled their eyes and went about their day. But Karen wasn't the type to take dismissal lightly. If she felt ignored, she doubled down. She started making rounds at odd hours, peering over fences, inspecting mailboxes. If something wasn't up to her imaginary standard, she'd let you know about it, loudly. Daniel had mostly ignored her, choosing to nod politely when she ranted about upholding community standards. But today, as he stepped out of his car, he noticed Karen standing at the edge of his driveway, arms crossed, lips pressed into a tight line. He sighed internally. This couldn't be good. "You can't park here," she announced, her voice carrying that signature mix of condescension and faux authority. Daniel blinked. "It's my driveway," Karen scoffed. "Yes, but it's visible from the street. According to the HOA guidelines, vehicles must be stored out of sight unless they meet aesthetic standards." He frowned. "Aesthetic standards? I've never heard of that rule." Karen gave a smug smile, tapping the clipboard in her hands. "Well, I have a copy of the HOA regulations right here. Maybe you should read up before assuming you know everything." Daniel exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. "Karen, I've been living here for 3 years, and I've never had an issue before. If this was a real rule, wouldn't I have heard about it by now?" Her eyes narrowed. "I have connections with the HOA board. I can make this very difficult for you if you choose to be difficult with me." There it was, that veiled threat. Daniel wasn't in the mood for a pointless argument, so he simply shrugged and walked toward his front door, leaving Karen standing there, fuming. Inside, he dropped his keys on the counter and ran a hand through his hair. This wasn't the first time she had tried something like this, and he had a bad feeling it wouldn't be the last. Still, he hadn't expected her to pull the HOA rulebook power play so soon. Something told him this was only the beginning. The next morning, Daniel decided to look up the HOA rules himself. He pulled up the official documents from the neighborhood website, scanning through pages of regulations. As expected, there was no mention of vehicles needing to be stored out of sight. Karen had completely made it up. He thought about confronting her but knew it would only escalate things. Instead, he decided to wait. Let her dig her own hole. But that patience would soon be tested, because the next time Karen showed up, she wouldn't be alone. And this time, she would bring backup. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that like button, share it with friends, and subscribe for more awesome content. And while you're at it, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. All right, let's keep going. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Daniel half expected Karen to strike again, immediately. But she didn't. Instead, she watched. He could feel her eyes on him whenever he stepped outside. She lingered on her porch, clipboard in hand, pretending to check her plants while subtly jotting things down. He knew it was only a matter of time before she made her next move. And when she did, she went big. A crisp white envelope was taped to Daniel's front door one evening when he got home. His name was written in neat, aggressive cursive. No return address. He didn't have to open it to know who it was from. Sighing, he ripped it open and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. Notice of HOA violation. Daniel skimmed the letter, his irritation growing with every line. According to Karen, he had racked up 3 violations. Failure to maintain lawn aesthetics, because his grass was uneven. Unauthorized placement of personal items. Apparently, his patio chairs weren't in the approved position. Improper vehicle storage. The same nonsense she had brought up before. At the bottom, she had written in bold, "Failure to comply within 48 hours will result in further action." Daniel scoffed, shaking his head. Further action? What was she going to do, stage a coup against his lawn? He crumpled the letter and tossed it onto the counter. This was getting ridiculous. He knew for a fact that his grass was fine, his chairs were exactly where they'd always been, and, most importantly, his car was parked legally. Karen was making things up, hoping to intimidate him. Ignoring her seemed like the best course of action. She was one neighbor with a clipboard and an inflated ego, not an actual authority figure. So Daniel did nothing, but Karen wasn't the type to be ignored. The next morning, he found her standing at the edge of his driveway, hands on her hips, eyes sharp with impatience. "I see you got my letter," she called out. Daniel sighed. "Yeah, I did." "And?" "And what?" he replied, folding his arms. "I'm not in violation of anything," Karen scoffed. "Your grass is patchy, your chairs are cluttered, and your car is still an eyesore. This neighborhood has standards, Daniel." "It's grass," he said, flatly. "It grows," she huffed. "It needs to be even." He gestured at her yard. "Karen, your own lawn has weeds," she bristled. "That's beside the point." Daniel shook his head. "Look, I read the HOA rules. None of what you're saying is real." Karen's lips curled into a tight, forced smile. "You don't want to challenge me on this?" There was something in her tone, something unsettling. It wasn't just a nosy neighbor throwing around fake authority anymore. She truly believed she had power over him. Daniel exhaled. "Karen, I have work to do. You can file as many fake violations as you want, but I'm not playing along." He walked inside, closing the door before she could respond. For the next few hours, he tried to push it out of his mind. But then, bang, bang, bang. The sudden aggressive knocking made his stomach tighten. Daniel pulled open the door to find Karen standing there again, but this time she wasn't alone. Beside her was a man in an ill-fitting uniform, complete with a badge clipped to his chest. Karen folded her arms smugly. "Since you refuse to follow the rules, I've had to take further action." Daniel's pulse quickened as he took in the sight. The man beside her wasn't a real cop, but he definitely wanted to look like one. And that's when Daniel realized Karen had just escalated this to a whole new level. Daniel stared at the man standing next to Karen. His uniform was unbuttoned. At the collar and his badge, if it was even real, looked like it had been bought from a novelty store. "This is Officer Reynolds," Karen announced smugly. "He's here to ensure you comply with the community's regulations." Daniel arched a brow. "Officer? From where?" Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. "I work with local enforcement," he said vaguely. Daniel's gut told him exactly what was happening. Karen had brought in some kind of rent-a-cop to intimidate him. Karen smirked. "You've ignored multiple warnings. That leaves me no choice but to escalate this." Daniel crossed his arms. "By hiring a fake cop?" Reynolds bristled. "I assure you, sir, I take my duties seriously." "And what duties are those?" Daniel challenged. Karen cut in before Reynolds could answer. "You have 24 hours to address your violations, or you'll be facing serious consequences." Daniel exhaled slowly, keeping his temper in check. "Karen, you're not the HOA. You're not the police. And this guy? He's not either." Karen's smile barely wavered. I have connections with the HOA board. You have no idea who you're messing with. Daniel wanted to laugh, but the way she said it, so certain, so arrogant, made him pause. Are you threatening me? He asked. Karen's eyes gleamed. I'm giving you a final warning. Daniel held her gaze for a long moment, before shaking his head. No. You're just a bored neighbor with too much time on your hands. He stepped back inside and locked the door. But he had a feeling this wasn't over. By the next morning, Karen had escalated. A new bright red notice was taped to his garage door. Final warning. Fines pending, underneath. In Karen's neat, aggressive handwriting was a list of supposed penalties. Unapproved vehicle storage. $250 fine failure to comply with lawn regulations. $150 fine obstruction of community aesthetics. $200 fine at the bottom, she had scrawled. Immediate payment required. Daniel let out a humorless laugh. This was insane. Did she actually expect him to hand her money? Just then, his neighbor Mike walked over, shaking his head. Man, she's really going after you, huh? You got one of these? Daniel asked, waving the notice. Mike snorted. Nope, just you. She's obsessed. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. She's not even on the HOA board. She just keeps throwing rules around. Mike folded his arms. You think she's bluffing? Daniel wanted to say yes, but deep down, a sliver of doubt crept in. What if she really did have connections? Karen had way too much confidence for someone making things up, and then things got worse. That evening, Daniel got a phone call, a blocked number. He hesitated, then answered. Hello? A slow, deliberate voice came through the speaker. Is this Daniel Carter? His stomach clenched. Who's asking? This is HOA enforcement. We've received multiple reports of violations from your property. If you fail to comply, legal action may be taken. Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. Who exactly am I speaking to? A pause. Then, that's not important. What matters is that you follow the rules. Daniel's mind raced. Was this real? No, it couldn't be. His eyes flicked toward Karen's house. Was this her? Did she set this up? He took a breath. Listen, unless you can provide actual HOA credentials, I'm not buying this. A beat of silence. Then, click, the line went dead. Daniel stood there, heart pounding. And the next morning, the harassment hit a new level. His mailbox was stuffed, with duplicate notices, each one stamped with bold red ink. Final notice, immediate action required. Some were slipped under his door. Others were tucked into his car's windshield wipers. It was relentless. Then a new email popped up in his inbox. The sender? HOA Compliance Office. It read, Mr. Carter, failure to comply with community guidelines may result in legal consequences. Our records indicate multiple unresolved violations. Kindly rectify these issues within 48 hours to avoid further action. At the bottom, there was a payment link. Daniel clenched his jaw. Karen had upped her game. Now she was trying to make this scam look official. He picked up his phone and dialed the actual HOA office. After a few rings, a receptionist answered. This is Westwood HOA. How can I help you? Daniel wasted no time. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of threatening notices, and I need to know if they're real. The woman on the line sounded confused. We haven't issued any violations in your area recently. His stomach dropped. So, no fines? No compliance warnings? Not that I'm aware of. She hesitated. Who's been contacting you? Daniel exhaled. It was Karen. It was always Karen. And now she wasn't just playing neighborhood watchdog. She was running a full-blown scam. This wasn't about rules anymore. It was about power. And Daniel had just realized he was her target. Daniel had seen His fair share of absurdity since moving into the neighborhood. But this was something else. 3 men stood on his doorstep, dressed in black polo shirts with HOA compliance, embroidered in cheap gold lettering. Their uniforms looked official enough at a glance, but something about them felt off. One of them even wore aviator sunglasses, at night. The tallest of the group, a burly man with a clipboard, cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, we're here. Regarding your numerous violations." Daniel crossed his arms. "And you are?" The man lifted his badge. It was laminated, flimsy, and had no actual government seal. "We represent the HOA Enforcement Division," he said. "Failure to comply with community standards will result in legal action." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Karen. It had to be Karen." "Right," he said, suppressing a smirk. "So which HOA office do you work for?" A brief pause. Then, "We're contracted directly through the board." Daniel tilted his head. "That's funny. Because I called the HOA yesterday and they had no idea what I was talking about." The man's jaw tightened. "Sir, this is your final warning. We have the authority to issue citations." One of the others, a stocky guy with a shaved head, pulled out a bright yellow ticket and handed it to Daniel. It read, "Notice of Immediate Compliance. Unapproved Vehicle Storage. 200th lawn violation. 150 failure. To adhere to HOA standards. 500 total due, 900." Daniel let out a short laugh. "You expect me to pay this?" "This isn't a joke," the burly man said. "If you refuse, further action will be taken." Daniel leaned against his doorframe. "Let me guess. Legal consequences?" Shaved head folded his arms. "If necessary." Daniel sighed. "All right, gentlemen. Hold that thought." He pulled out his phone and started recording. "Say that again? You're with the HOA, and I owe how much?" A flicker of hesitation crossed the burly man's face. "Sir, recording us without permission is against community policy." Daniel grinned. "Oh, is it? Because I'm pretty sure I have the right to record on my own property." The third man, a lanky guy who hadn't spoken yet, muttered, "This is getting stupid." Burley ignored him. "Mr. Carter, we strongly recommend that you comply." "Or what?" Daniel asked, still recording. No one answered. For a long moment they just stood there, shifting uncomfortably under the glow of Daniel's porch light. Finally, Shaved Head muttered, "Forget it. Let's go." Burley shot Daniel a glare. "You'll regret this," Daniel smiled. "Yeah? I'll be sure to mark my calendar." The 3 of them turned and walked back to their car, a beat-up black SUV with no official markings. Daniel waited until they pulled away, then looked down at the fake ticket in his hand. Karen had officially lost her mind. The next morning, Daniel sat at his computer, digging into Karen's scam. The first thing he did was check the website printed. On the citation, it was a basic page, slapped together with a stock HOA logo and vague legal threats. There was a payment portal but no actual contact information. Next, he searched for the HOA Compliance Division. No results. It didn't exist. He clicked on the payment link, but instead of entering any info, he ran a reverse lookup on the site's domain. And there it was. Registered to Karen L. Whitmore. Daniel leaned back, whistling low. Karen hadn't just called in some thugs to intimidate him. She had built an entire fake enforcement agency to scam homeowners. His hands tightened into fists. How many people had fallen for this? A knock at his door snapped him from his thoughts. He checked the peephole. "Mike." Daniel opened the door. "Hey." Mike glanced around before stepping inside. "Dude, did you get a visit last night?" Daniel nodded. 3 guys in fake uniforms?" Mike let out a breath. "Yeah, they came to my house too. Gave me some nonsense fine for excessive noise." Daniel showed him the fake ticket. "Recognize this?" Mike's eyes widened. "Yep, same exact format. Daniel pulled up the website registration info. It's a scam. Karen's behind it. Mike's mouth fell open. Are you serious? Dead serious. She set up a fake HOA enforcement team to shake people down for money. Mike's face darkened. So what do we do? Daniel smirked. We expose her. He turned his phone screen toward Mike. The video from last night was already uploading. Title: Caught on camera. Fake HOA police try to scam me. Mike let out a low whistle. Oh man, Karen's gonna flip. Daniel grinned. Good, because now it wasn't just about stopping her. It was about making sure everyone knew the truth. Daniel had spent the last 2 hours digging through HOA regulations, cross-referencing fines, and chasing every thread he could find. And what he uncovered? It was worse than he thought. First, the official HOA never issued fines directly to homeowners. Everything went through the board, with written warnings first. Second, there was no HOA enforcement division. It simply didn't exist. And third, his biggest discovery yet, Karen wasn't even on the HOA board. Daniel sat back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. So why was she acting like she ran the place? His phone vibrated. Mike. Dude, Mike said the second Daniel answered. Got an update? Oh, I've got more than an update. Daniel pulled up the HOA's official directory. Karen? She's not even on the board. Mike whistled. No way. Way, Daniel said. She's been throwing around rules that she has no authority to enforce. Mike was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, So what's her deal? Why's she going this far? Daniel exhaled. That's what I'm trying to figure out. And the more he looked, the more things didn't add up. The next step was the fake HOA police. Daniel pulled up the video he had recorded of the men at his door, pausing on the burly man's badge. He zoomed in. It had a serial number, but it was too short, only 5 digits. Real HOA or security personnel had longer ID numbers with official agency codes. He cross-referenced the company name they had given him. Nothing. Not a business, not a registered HOA partner. So who the hell were these guys? His mind went back to the payment website. Karen had registered it herself. Could she have hired them? Or worse, were they just people she knew? A new thought crept in, something darker than before. If Karen had friends willing to dress up and intimidate people, what else was she capable of? Daniel's next stop was public records. He logged into the county's property database and typed in Karen Whitmore. Her house popped up, owned for 8 years. No HOA violations. Then something strange caught his eye. Under community leadership roles, it listed HOA board member 2018 to 2020. That meant she had been on the board, but not anymore. Daniel frowned. Did she get kicked out? He scrolled further. Board meeting notes. October 2020 A summary appeared. Discussion regarding misuse of HOA funds. Former board member Karen Whitmore removed from position. Investigation closed due to insufficient evidence. Daniel blinked. Misuse of funds? So Karen had been in power once, and she'd lost it. That explained a lot. She wasn't enforcing rules, she was trying to take back control. And the fake police? The fake fines? A last-ditch power grab. Daniel's stomach twisted. How many people had already fallen for this? The next morning, Daniel grabbed his phone and dialed the HOA office. A receptionist answered. Westwood HOA, how can I help you? Hey, I've got a concern, Daniel said. I've been getting fake citations from someone claiming to be HOA enforcement, the receptionist sighed. Let me guess. Karen Whitmore? Daniel blinked. You know about this? Unfortunately, the woman said, you're not the first complaint. We've had several homeowners report her for harassment. Daniel gritted his teeth. And you guys haven't done anything? The receptionist hesitated. It's complicated. Since she's no longer on the board, we can't legally remove her from the neighborhood. All we can do is issue cease and desist letters, which she's ignored. Daniel clenched his jaw. She was ignoring legal warnings, which meant she had no intention of stopping. That night, Daniel sat on his porch staring at Karen's house across the street. The lights were on. Shadows moved behind the curtains. What was her next move? His phone buzzed. A new email from HOA Compliance Office. Subject, Final Notice. Daniel's blood ran cold. It was the same email as before, the fake one. Except now it included a new threat. Failure to comply will result in escalated action. Your continued non-compliance has been noted. Escalated action? Was she doubling down? Daniel glanced back at Karen's house. Something told him this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Daniel was done playing defense. For weeks, Karen had harassed him with fake citations, bogus threats, and a manufactured HOA police force. She thought she had won, but this time he was ready. With every piece of evidence he had gathered, videos, emails, even county records proving Karen had no authority, he had enough to expose her. And now, all he had to do was wait. Daniel's plan was simple. He had called the real authorities, the county sheriff's department, and explained everything. At first they were skeptical, but once he sent them the fake citations and footage of the impersonators, they took him seriously. Sounds like a criminal fraud case, the deputy had said. We'll send someone. That was all Daniel needed, so he set the bait. He responded to Karen's latest threat. I understand. I'll comply. Let's meet in person to finalize it. Then he waited. The night of the trap. Daniel stood on his porch, phone in hand. The sheriff's officers were parked down the street out of sight. Then, right on schedule, they arrived. Karen and her goons rolled up in an SUV, headlights cutting through the dark. The same 3 fake HOA officers stepped out, still in their ridiculous uniforms. And then there was Karen. She was smug, her arms crossed as she strutted toward Daniel's porch. I'm glad you finally came to your senses, she said. You've wasted enough time fighting this, Daniel smirked. Oh, I agree. This is long overdue. One of the fake enforcers stepped forward, clipboard in hand. You're lucky, Carter. We were about to escalate this. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Oh, yeah? What was next? A fake arrest? Karen's expression flickered, just for a second. Then she recovered. Enough games. We're here to settle this. You owe $500 in fines, payable tonight. Daniel leaned back against his porch railing. You're right, Karen. Let's settle this. He pulled out his phone and clicked a button. Bright headlights cut through the night as 2 real sheriff's deputies emerged from the unmarked car down the street. Karen's confidence shattered instantly. HOA police! One of her men blurted. This is official business, officers. The deputies weren't amused. Oh, really? The lead deputy said, stepping forward. Because we ran a check on your HOA compliance division. And guess what? It doesn't exist. Karen took a step back. This is a misunderstanding. The deputy held up a printed copy of one of her fake citations. You do realize that impersonating legal authority is a crime, right? One of the fake officers bolted. The second deputy was faster. Within seconds, he was pinned against the hood of the squad car, handcuffs snapping into place. The burly guy with the clipboard put his hands up, sweat dripping down his face. I didn't know. She told us it was real. The first deputy turned to Karen. You want to explain that? Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time, she wasn't in control. 10 minutes later, the neighborhood was awake. People stood outside, whispering as Karen and her goons were questioned. A few neighbors even approached Daniel. You caught her? One man asked. We thought she was part of the board. Daniel shook his head. She was, years ago. She got kicked out for fraud. Gasps, murmurs. Someone cursed under their breath. The deputy turned back to Karen. "You've been harassing homeowners under false authority. That's fraud and intimidation, at the very least," Karen finally snapped. "This is absurd," she shrieked. "I was just—" The deputy cut her off. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent." The handcuffs clicked. Karen's face went pale. "Wait, no, you can't do this. This is my neighborhood." But the officers weren't listening. They guided her toward the squad car as she thrashed. "I was helping the community," she screamed. "You'll regret this." Daniels watched as the car door slammed shut. The next morning, Daniel sat on his porch, drinking coffee. The air felt lighter. A new email popped up from the official HOA. "Thank you for your cooperation. Karen Whitmore is permanently barred from any future HOA involvement. Authorities are handling the case from here." Daniel grinned. It was finally over. Or at least, he hoped it was. Karen had lost control. For weeks, she had played her little game, issuing fake violations, threatening homeowners, sending her pretend HOA police to intimidate them. But this wasn't a game anymore, because now, the real police were here, and Karen's empire of lies was about to collapse. The lead sheriff's deputy stepped forward, arms crossed. "All right, let's get this straight. You're claiming to be part of the HOA compliance division?" he asked, eyes locked on Karen and her so-called officers. Karen swallowed hard. She needed a way out, fast. "Yes, well, no," she stammered. "We're an oversight group. We assist the HOA in, enforcing rules." The deputy raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because the HOA says they've never heard of you." Karen forced a laugh, but it sounded hollow. "They must be confused. We work behind the scenes. You know, keeping things in check." The second deputy wasn't buying it. He pulled out a folder. "We did some digging. There's no record of any HOA compliance division. No registration, no licensing, nothing." Karen's face turned pale. She tried to recover. "We don't need official paperwork. We're volunteers. We just—" The first deputy cut her off. "Save it. Impersonating legal authority is a crime." One of the fake HOA officers, a bulky man with a clipboard, immediately turned on Karen. "She told us it was real," he blurted out. "I swear we thought we were legit." Karen's head snapped toward him. "Shut up, Tony." But Tony wasn't done. "She said she had HOA approval, said we were neighborhood security, and that homeowners had to listen to us." The deputy smirked. "Well, that's funny, because we ran background checks too. Guess what we found?" The real twist was coming. The second deputy held up a printed report. "One of you has an outstanding warrant." Silence. Then the deputy's eyes landed on one of Karen's officers, a skinny guy with nervous eyes. The moment he saw the paper, he bolted. "Hey!" the first deputy barked, sprinting after him. The suspect didn't make it far. He barely got 10 feet before the deputy tackled him to the pavement. "Get off me!" the man screamed, struggling. The deputy pressed his knee into the man's back, locking the cuffs on his wrists. "John Carter, wanted for fraud and identity theft. You just made this a whole lot worse for yourself." Karen was speechless. Her fake enforcer was a wanted felon. Daniel, still standing on his porch, folded his arms. "Wow, Karen. Great hiring process," Karen snapped. "You don't understand," she shrieked. "I was trying to help this neighborhood, keeping the wrong people out, enforcing standards. None of you get it." The deputy shook his head. "No, Karen. What you did was run a scam." She turned to the other fake enforcers. "Back me up. We were in this together." But they had already taken a step back. Tony shook his head. "No way, lady. I didn't sign up for jail." The deputy sighed. "Well, unfortunately, you kind of did." 15 minutes later, the squad cars were full. Karen, handcuffed, sat in the back seat, red-faced and furious. "This is ridiculous. "I was doing my duty," she screamed. "You need me. This place will fall apart without me." The deputy didn't even look at her. "Yeah, sure. You can explain it to the judge." The fake enforcers were in another car, heads down, silent, only. One of them, Tony, spoke up. "We seriously didn't know, man." The deputy shrugged. "Doesn't matter now." The neighborhood had gathered. People whispered, pointed. Some had their phones out, recording. One elderly woman shook her head. "She acted like she ran this place." A younger man chuckled. "Guess she ran it straight to jail." Daniel stood, with his arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. A neighbor nudged him. "You really got her, huh?" Daniel smirked. "She got herself." The police cars pulled away, taking Karen and her empire of fake authority with them. For the first time in weeks, the street felt peaceful. And Daniel? He was just glad it was over. Karen was finally gone. But her mess? That was still unraveling. The next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing. Everyone had seen the footage. Karen, handcuffed, screaming about law and order while the real police stuffed her into the squad car. Her fake officers looking just as pathetic. Their heads hung low. It was all over social media now. A local news station had even picked up the story. HOA scammer arrested for fraud and intimidation. The headline read. Daniel scrolled through. The comments under the video someone had uploaded. Wait, she wasn't even on the HOA? LOL. Imagine running a fake police force just to feel important. This is the most Karen thing I've ever seen. Homeowners should sue her. Oh, and they were. The real HOA board had filed an official complaint against Karen for fraud and impersonation. Several neighbors were talking about pressing charges for harassment. And the best part? The cops weren't just charging her with impersonation. They found out she'd been collecting fake HOA fines from other residents, literally pocketing the money. That was fraud, which meant jail time. Daniel couldn't help but grin as he watched the chaos unfold. For months, she had tormented him, demanded he repaint his house, trim his already trimmed hedges, threatened fines that weren't real, all because she needed to feel in control. And now, she had lost everything. That evening, a few neighbors gathered in Daniel's front yard. A middle-aged man shook his head. "I still can't believe it. She always acted like she was running things." "She was running a scam," Daniel corrected, smirking. An older woman sighed. "We should have spoken up sooner. She tried to fine me for leaving my recycling bin out too long." Another man laughed. "She told me my dog was against HOA breed standards." "I checked. There's no such rule." A woman with her arms crossed exhaled sharply. "She made my mother cry, told her our garden gnomes were a violation, and threatened to get us evicted." Someone else chimed in. "I heard she even tried to evict a veteran for lowering property values." Daniel chuckled. "Well, at least it's over now." "Yeah," someone agreed. "And you really took her down?" Daniel just shrugged. "She did that to herself." A young woman grinned. "We should throw a block party to celebrate." Laughter rippled through the group. For the first time in a long time, the neighborhood felt alive again. A few days later, the real HOA board sent out an official notice. To all homeowners, the individual known as Karen had no official position with the HOA and was acting independently. Please disregard any prior violations or fines she issued. If you were affected, you may contact local authorities. Daniel read it twice, then pinned it to his fridge. Victory. A week later, Daniel received a letter from Karen. He almost didn't open it, but curiosity got the best of him. Inside was a handwritten note. "I hope you're happy. You ruined my life. I was just trying to keep this neighborhood in order. You'll regret this." Daniel laughed out loud. Even after everything, she still believed she was the victim. He grabbed a pen, flipped the paper over, and wrote 2 words. "Enjoy prison." Then, with a smirk, he tossed it in the trash. Karen was the past. The neighborhood had already moved on, and as Daniel stepped outside to join his neighbors, this time with no fear of ridiculous fines or fake enforcers, he realized something. For the first time in years, his home truly felt like home. If you enjoyed this video and want to see the next part, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated. See you in the next one. Your support means the world.